Hello, welcome back to Circling Seattle Sports. This is going to be a sort of impromptu version of our Seattle Kraken podcast, keeping up with the Seattle Kraken. There is some news to keep up with today, even though it is Wednesday, April 8th, an off day for the Kraken. They're back in Seattle after road back to back in Winnipeg and Minnesota. The news coming earlier this afternoon, first reported by Elliot Friedman of Hockey Night in Canada, is that President of Hockey Operations Ron Francis is out of his current position and will not be with the team past this season. He is set to step down from that position at the end of the year, per a press release, per the Kraken official article on the matter. This means that general manager Jason Botterill decided to not load right now. Jason Botterill, if it will load, I might have to pull it up on my phone at this point. Jason Botterill will take over as I think it's the vice president. Here we go. The team's executive vice president and the general manager. So he will continue to stay in his general manager role, leading hockey operations as the team's executive vice president. Folks have pointed there's questions about this. It's not clear if this is just for the rest of this season, and then the ownership group will reevaluate in the summer. Or is it long term? It's not clear. There's no definitive timeline mentioned in that piece of information in this article. Kraken CEO Todd Lewicki is expected to speak tomorrow morning ahead of the team's morning skate at Climate Pledge Arena before the team hosts Las Vegas. We will be there for that, so we will obviously have some information regarding that. So that will be something to go over, but it's certainly interesting here. The decision between Francis and the team was mutually agreed that he will step down from his position upon next week's conclusion of the regular season, ending a nearly 7-year executive run by the team's very first general manager. So, with that, I decided to give some friends of mine a call. RJ from Emerald City Hockey, who will spend some time talking here for about half an hour, talking about some different things here about Ron, about Jason, and then we'll have a little bit less time with Darren Brown of Sound of Hockey to talk about those sort of things, as well as talking to both those two about head coach Lane Lambert, his standing throughout this first season as the Kraken head coach. So just wanted to come on, get some minds together that have been around this franchise since the inception, covering the team, for these 5 years. Bring them in to talk about it more than just myself. So I'm going to put these in here now for you to see. And that will be this episode. So thank you. And we'll see you
This
later.
is what this is the second or third time that news has dropped relating to this franchise, and well, probably fourth now. And we've called you RJ, so welcome back. This is RJ's like my break glass in case of emergency for Seattle Kraken. The information was the Larson deal, the Decord deal. Oh well, there was the Grubauer thing as well, and then the last time that Ron Francis was involved in news with Jason Botterill, and now we've got more Ron Francis. Um, we're gonna jump into it, RJ. Obviously, this is big news. I will refresh so that you're not like anybody who's watching this is not like, "Hey, what do you mean? What what are we talking about?" I imagine you know what's happening if you're tuning into this. Uh, Today, the Kraken announced today, April 8th, that Ron Francis will no longer be the president of hockey operations after the current season, 25-26 season. A decision that was mutually agreed upon per the team's press release, not in the official press release, but on the Kraken website in their post about it, their article about it. Jason Botterill will take over. Or you might have the. Oh no, I've got it now. I was going to say this might take a second to find the article. Um, Jason Botterill, currently the general manager, will lead hockey operations as the team's executive vice president, sorry, and general manager, which gives you some pause. I know we'll get to that in a minute. Um, we'll get into some of the other things here. There's some quotes from Todd Lewicki, who will speak tomorrow ahead of the Kraken's morning skate before hosting Vegas. Oh, they get to host Vegas, and it's a third Jersey night. Yay! It's all going to be wonderful tomorrow. I guess initially, like, what do you think about when you see this initially? Because I first saw the Elliot Friedman tweet about a change in the NHL. I didn't think anything of it, right? Because there have been changes in New Jersey, there have been the coaching changes around the league. I thought it was something else. I didn't think the Kraken were going to pull the trigger effectively, right, on something like this. What is your knee-jerk sort of reaction about seeing, that Ron will no longer be involved with this franchise, past this current season?
Yeah, well, my first reaction was, I mean, good. This is long overdue. This is something that needed to happen a while ago, that should have happened at least a year ago. I criticized pretty strongly the decision to promote Ron Francis to president of hockey ops, to promote Jason Botterill to GM that they made last summer. I think they're still feeling the negative effects of that. And after another failed season, somebody somewhere had to be held accountable. There was no other option. And I think Ron Francis certainly deserves the lion's share of the blame for where this team is at. He was with the team basically since the start. He was responsible for all of the day-to-day roster decisions for the first 4 seasons of the team that led them to largely this point. He was responsible for the expansion draft. He was responsible for building a lot of the off-ice stuff with the organization. And you look at it through 5 years, and the organization is not in a good or a healthy place. And I think he absolutely had to go. This is the bare minimum that had to happen. I think if they had kept him on beyond this year, that would have been a sure sign that nobody in the org was paying attention, that accountability did not exist. So that's good that Francis is gone. I think I've said before, I think he's hiring him to start the team was the biggest mistake the franchise has ever made. They finally move on from it. So that all is good. And so that was my first reaction. I was happy to see that because it just absolutely needed to happen. The more I've thought about it, and especially seeing the news about Jason Botterill, again, we'll lock this down tomorrow and confirm like what exactly that means by him taking over. I imagine that means he'll be the GM again next season. That's probably what that means. If that is the case, then the more I think about it, again, while I think it was absolutely the right thing to do to get rid of Ron Francis, I feel like this is a half measure. They're not going far enough, and I am really, really concerned about the state of this organization now. But my first thought was good. The move needed to happen.
And that was, you kind of alluded to it, and I will obviously now lead you to that, talking about Botterill, because that was a question I got somewhat immediately after, the initial news about Ron was that, is this enough? Like, is solely removing Ron Francis from the picture enough? I don't think so. I think it's just a general, there's a lot going on with this franchise that, you know, needs to be tweaked before they get to the perennial playoff contender that they so often talked about, right? In the beginning, I think Ron himself, I always bring this quote up, and you remember that. The talk about a 4 to 5 year plan, right? And this is year 5. And there's not a lot of a clear vision or a clear idea of what this team is, what the team is. Um, why Botterill? Why do you think, you know, I have my reasons to think this, but obviously, there are folks who don't have, the insight or think like we do, and that's fine, that's fair. Um, but because you could look at it solely as in a vacuum, like, I mean, the McMahon move, it's 2 draft picks, that's fine. I'm fine with that. I think considering the free agent
It's a
class
good
is coming
trade.
up, yeah, it's good. I've heard some things about that trade, about how that was really up. Obviously, we got it really late, but that it all coming together was super late. Um, you know, we've heard tops of a potential big swing. There was the news about the potential Panarin trade. Uh, can you lay out for me why Jason Botterill staying in his position and effectively, and maybe getting more control from what it sounds like? I could be wrong about that, isn't in the franchise's best interest going forward to, truly build a contender.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And I know this is something that might give some people pause, given that he's only been on the job as GM for 1 year. And if you were to believe the people in the organization, and I do on this point, that when they made the decision to promote Botterill to GM, when they made the decision to promote Francis to president of hockey ops, that Botterill at that point had full autonomy over all of the GM type decisions, the day to day, the roster decisions, all of that. And I believe that. And so I think he has only had 1 year on the job there. And I think in a lot of cases, you can't judge a GM by just 1 year. Like I get that. And so that entirely shouldn't be on him. But this whole thing feels like a half measure that's caused by the ownership basically just being boxed in by last year's decision to promote Francis and Botterill, where they're looking at it and they're thinking, okay, it's not fair to fire a GM after just 1 year. Here's why I think they should though, because you have to look at it in the grander sense. You can't be worried about what is, I guess, fair more or less to Jason Botterill. You have to focus on, okay, who is going to be the right person to get you to where you need to go, and especially fairly quickly because the Sonics are coming. We know they feel that pressure, that deadline. And when it comes to Jason Botterill, I think if you just want to place this last year on him, and I'm not going to go beyond that at all, I think the rest is mostly Ron Francis, but you look at the 1 year that he has had on the job and where I think he is responsible. First of all, it's everything that has happened this season. It's making the decision to forego development of your young players and go for it and try to make the playoffs this year, to hire Lane Lambert as a win now type of head coach, not a development type head coach. This could have been a transition year this past season, and I would have been fine with any result in the standings, but this clearly was not a transition year. Jason Botterill, not Ron Francis, chose to go that direction and try to make the playoffs. He evaluated his team poorly. He did not realize that this had no shot of being a playoff team, and he brought in Lane Lambert, and the season went disastrously. I put that entirely on Botterill. He was the one in charge of that decision. And I think if you're Botterill, you could maybe make the argument that going in that direction was something that was necessary in order to fix the culture, right? There was a losing culture. The effort problems were absolutely there under Dan Bylsma. You bring in Lambert, and even though maybe you lose a little on the development side, Shane Wright, Yanni Newman, whatever, you fix the culture and you get the guys giving consistent effort again. And as we've seen from the last week or two, that has completely failed. Completely failed. The culture is every bit of as much of a problem as it was before. And so that's on Botterill. And look, 1 year of massive failure is not enough, I think, in a vacuum to fire a GM. But you look at the big picture, and Botterill still was with the organization from day one.
Right.
And I think if this is what you keep, if there's no other major changes, right? If this is it, if you're just letting go of Francis, then the front office, the people who are in charge of getting you where you need to go, is still made up of people who have been here from day one. And if that's the case, it's hard to believe that anything is going to change. All the decisions from this past year that were Botterill's decisions look every bit as short-sighted and unwise as the decisions that Ron Francis made in the couple years prior. The Stevenson signing, the Montour signing, all of that, it reeks of the same short-sightedness, the same rushed approach, the same misevaluation of the team. And I thought this, after another big failure, this was your opportunity to really clean house and bring in somebody with fresh eyes who can be in charge and look at the mess that has been created and get to work starting to fix it. I don't think we're going to see that. I think we're going to see more of the same, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's, I remember I asked you obviously about your knee-jerk reaction to this, and that was something that, you know, I had no, because of this franchise's seemingly unwillingness to kind of admit defeat, right? Admit the blame. I've seen that kind of on the Mariners side where they've made signings, big signings that don't work out, and they keep running the guy out there because they don't want to say, "Hey, we screwed this up. We got this wrong." You know, we will own that. The franchise really hasn't owned that, right? Um, I do want to ask though, I am curious because, with this current this, the I can't even say skid because the entire stretch since the Olympic break has been bad, right? I mean, I was looking at this last night after the game, um, in Minnesota. Your wins are beating up on the worst team in the league in Vancouver. Um, you beat up on Florida Panthers team that's basically a bunch of call-ups because they're all banged up, right? You snuck one out in Tampa Bay. It's fine. Other than that, it's a bunch of losses to teams that you needed to beat to do it. You had control. I mean, what? Edmonton and Anaheim are like tied in the Pacific right now. Last that I saw, that could have changed by now. at 87 points, Um, but anyway, my point is a lot of people have looked at this as a coaching thing. I wholeheartedly disagree. I think, and your tweet about this, was it earlier this year or something about that, where it says 3 coaches in 3 years, all of them have realized that the same group, and it's not verbatim, of course, this same group just isn't good enough. They can't handle this. There was a quote that Lane had earlier during this stretch since the break where it says a lot of guys, haven't been in this situation. And that's true. Years 4, 3, and 4, they weren't in this late into the season, right? I was looking at you were sending a older deep dive episode to somebody and saying start at this mark, and they had effectively been eliminated by Christmas. Um, they haven't been at this point. At this point in year 2, I mean, they had that crazy shooting percentage and they were kind of cruising along. Um, Why is Lane Lambert not? I know you haven't really mentioned it. You've mentioned him as a win now guy. I know he's not perfect. He is not perfect. I have questioned some of the goaltending decisions. There's some guys I would have sat that haven't been sat, whatever, right? I still largely don't think he's the main issue here. Um, or a major issue at least, because the main issue is gone. But there are obviously still pieces to that puzzle. What do you think about Lane? Because at least to me, in my basic hockey infancy, it seems like a guy who's gotten this group of largely the same players, largely the same veterans who are in this leadership group, and you talk about a culture thing, part of that leadership group, to actually, play the style of hockey that got them into a playoff spot in the first place and had them in a playoff spot for most of the year. That is different than what happened under Bausma and what had started to happen under Hackstall, in year 3. Um, I just am curious your thoughts on Lambert and his role in this season because, I think he gets a bit too much flack for, someone who I think, has arguably done their job to put the Kraken in this position. Well, the position, not the current ugly skid, but to be even in a situation where you're near a playoff spot and you can be frustrated that you were anywhere near it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I like Lane Lambert. I think he's a good coach. I think he did the absolute best that he possibly can with this group this year. But at the end of the day, this group of players is one, not skilled enough, and two, cannot be bothered to give the effort that is needed when it matters most. And you can see it. Watch any Lane Lambert post-game media availability for the last week. He's fed up. He's out of answers. He cannot explain why his team does not want to work in the way that they need to work. And I think he's kind of at the end of the rope with these guys. That said, I think he's a good coach. He's pulled every lever he can possibly pull. I put very little of the blame on him this season. I think there's certain elements like the PK where again, he's not directly coaching it, that could certainly be improved. But at the end of the day, the roster's just not good enough. That's what it comes down to. That's why Francis is being let go, because he did more than anybody else to create this roster in this situation. It's an interesting question as to whether you keep Lambert for, I think this basically decides if that's all the moves they're making, Lambert's staying for next season. It'd be
Right.
really near unprecedented. The last time I looked this up today,
Okay.
the last time an NHL team started the season with 4 different coaches and 4 consecutive seasons was in 2012, like 2009 to 2012 with the New Jersey Devils. So it's been a long time.
Wow.
Teams don't do this. So I think Lambert is staying, certainly after the news today. I think he's staying for sure. My concern is that as good of a coach as he is, I think he's not a good fit for what the team should be trying to do next year, which is to develop young talent first and foremost.
Right.
That's not his specialty. That's not what he does. We saw it with Shane Wright this year. We saw it with Yanni Newman this year. Berkeley Catton played really well and looked really good. He has like 16 points. Like I think he's doing really well despite everything, and I think he'll be fine. But he's not really being given the offensive creativity that you're going to need to develop into like an 80-90 point guy, which I think Berkeley Catton can be. So if you're looking at next year, and also like the big thing that Lane Lambert's best at is just squeezing the absolute best points wise, just gaming the standings, squeezing the best defensive shutdown hockey out of everyone, and to try and just gain every little standings point you can. Are you really doing that next year? Is that what you're trying to do again? Do you think this team can reasonably be a playoff team next year? No. We see how big the mess is. We see how much big changes are needed. You're not going to be If you're not delusional, you're not trying to make the playoffs next year. You're not seriously going for that. And in that case, the thing that Lambert's best at doesn't help you. So
Right.
I just don't think he's a good fit for what they should be trying to do. As much as I
Uh,
like him, he's a good coach.
yeah, and can you bank on the West being this terrible again next year? I don't. I
No,
would imagine you would like to do that, and if you're in a smart world, um, yeah, you can imagine that, every team in the West is going to be this bad again next year, and then you can, maybe get a redo. Uh, I would really like to not see them try and push to make the playoffs next year because I don't think they can make the moves necessary. I mean, there's capital here. I'm not defending it and saying that they should, but with the picks that they've got and the cap space that should open up, even if you're going to factor a Bobby McMahon extension in there, which I still think I would like to keep him around. I don't know. Um, I don't know. There are tools there, but it definitely would still like to kind of start to see a transition period here. Yeah, no, I just think that Lambert gets a lot of flack again. I'm not saying he's the greatest coach in the world. I just don't think that the Kraken got to this point where, it's totally up to him. He is the coaching failure here. Because again, if people have asked about line changes and pairing changes and so on and so forth. We've seen that. I just, at a point you have to hold the players accountable, right? Like in sports, and you know this, in
we've
sports
seen three
across,
coaches for 3 years with three different
right,
coaching styles. What more do you need to see?
right. Like you can always blame the coach, that's fine, but when there's a common denominator here in this largely the same roster, there are changes, right? And not like Chandler Stevenson, um, Chandler Stevenson, Capo Caco, you have Bobby McMahon, Berkeley Cat. You mentioned Berkeley. Berkeley persists despite the horrors around him, which is kind of funny. Which is also interesting to me because Oscar Fisker Molgar, I'm looking at the roster here. You've got a guy from Coachella Valley that you have drafted who actually looks pretty solid. And, I would like to see him continue his development next year. I mean, he looked pretty good at the Olympics. He looks pretty good, these games he's gotten up here. I wish Ryan Winterton, and it's tough because he's had some family stuff recently. I wish Ryan Winterton had more of a runway because I liked the game that he can play. Um, you know, just make it Coachella Valley North. Um, yeah, I don't. What do you hope to hear from Todd? I mean, because I don't know, it's tough with any high-ranking official, right? Because you're going to get so much corporate speak. I mean, is there anything in particular that you're hoping to hear from Todd tomorrow to give you because that's
That's a good question.
it's there's it's interesting reading so many of the comments from fans or reading fans putting out into the world their thoughts because I always say this on my and I'm sure you guys have talked about it on whether it's post game lives or the deep dive or your stuff on Patreon, but I've encouraged people to enjoy the actual wins this year because I didn't really think that they could ride it out to this. And that, for the people who, whether season ticket holders, partial packages, whatever, you invest a lot of money, time, and effort into a franchise. I'm not saying you can totally be unfair and be weird and like throw things on the ice, right? But you deserve to be a little upset if there's no true vision going forward, right? Or you're actually winning. You need one of those things, and they don't have either now. Um, I just am curious what you'd need to hear tomorrow from Todd to whether have well, I don't think we can bank on, we're gonna winning season next year, but to be sold on the vision of as you mentioned going forward, because yeah, they're gonna be in it could be. I think there's another vote in July regarding the NBA. The team could be here as soon as the 27-28 season.
Mhm.
And even then, there will be a lot like happened with the Kraken, right? When it was the NHL, I've got the NHL to Seattle stick over there. When it's NHL to Seattle, there was still excitement brewing, and it was a constant piece of, you know, discussion. They were in the spotlight, and they far more than the Kraken were when they were coming here. This is a team that's well loved and has been loved since they effectively died as a franchise. I don't know. What do you need to hear to have faith in the vision given again, I think Todd will be a little bit busy in the coming months, and so maybe he won't have as much time. I don't know. He can delegate off to other people, but I don't, even then, people are frustrated with that, right? With the direction that um, owner Sam Holloway and him. Usually they directed at Sam. I don't think they directed as much at Todd, but Todd is kind of the front-facing person in a lot of these situations, right?
Yeah. So what I want to hear from him tomorrow, I mean, ideally, look, and this is this is probably asking too much, but I would ideally like to hear because we're going to ask for clarification on the what the Botterill returning thing means, and he I would love to hear him say that just is taking over for right now, and we're going to reevaluate things in the coming weeks, top to bottom in the organization, and see what needs to change. If I hear that, fantastic. Then that's great. That tells me they're taking the steps they need to. I don't expect to hear that. Um, the other thing I could hear that would maybe make me feel a little better is him saying that the organization plans to hire a new president of hockey ops, above Jason Bottrill, and it will be an outside hire. And so then you have somebody who might be another pair of eyes on everything. And even if Bottrill's handling the day to day, if he has to stay, then you get somebody from outside this organization who's actually looking at things critically and at what's been built. I think that absolutely needs to happen. And if Todd Lewicki does not say either one of those things, or if that's not happening, then I don't think there's anything that he could say that would reassure me that ownership, that the people above the front office actually has good instincts and knows what they're doing. And that's my real concern. Um, Again, I'm really, really starting to worry about ownership, about Todd Lewicki, the people in charge above the front office, because I also, I guess, would like to hear an explanation for the decision to promote Ron Francis
Mm,
and Jason Bottrill last year, given both of their failures over the past year. I would like to hear that. I would like to hear what he expects will change, given that everybody running the front office, at least we're led to believe at this point, are people
right.
that have been here since day one and have been around. I'd like to hear concretely what in terms of the front office's approach to things, in their outlook, in their strategy, what will change, how can we expect anything to change, and I would like to hear a good answer to that, because I think that's a fair question at this point, given that they've decided not to clean house. I'd like to hear why he ultimately, or why ownership ultimately decided not to clean house and to keep Bottrill aboard. I basically I want to hear an explanation for the decision to not go further here. But unless he tells me that, it implies that either Bottrill might not be back, or that they're going to bring in somebody else from the outside, nothing else he says is going to matter.
Right. And maybe to play the advocate here, I'm sure that could still be on the table, right? I don't imagine it's like, hey, yeah, we're gonna fire everybody, with 5 games to go in the season. I don't know. You probably keep that under wraps to an extent,
I
right?
don't I don't know that you do. Look, Toronto did it.
No, that's
Toronto
true.
did it. The
Yeah.
Leafs just did it. And that's the other thing with the timing of this that's really puzzling to me is that, and by the
Mm.
way, I want to give credit to Dylan, the other half of ECH, who called this a couple days ago. He said, I bet they fire Francis on Wednesday. But the reason was, I think he probably felt that they were going to fire Francis and Bottrill. They were going to clean house. And at that point, you get an early start on the GM search, because
Ah,
Nashville's looking for a new GM. Toronto's
right.
looking for a new GM. There are going to be openings there, and you want to do this early so you can get a jump on filling those openings. That's why you would do it now. If you're not doing that,
Oh,
why are you announcing this now? I really think the reason they're announcing it now is just so it wouldn't get so ugly at these final home games. You don't hear fire Francis chants from the fans, like just trying to keep it from getting embarrassing. I think that's probably why you do it now. But man, like that's what we thought as far as the timing. So
okay. That
I don't
makes
know.
sense. Yeah. Well, and then New Jersey, I think, right, still needs a
Oh yeah,
new.
New Jersey, exactly. So we're seeing teams
So
teams doing this.
yeah, you've got teams that are better destinations. I'm sure someone will jump on, a roster that has a Jack, I almost said Quinn Hughes, Jack Hughes. You could look in that Toronto market either way. Nashville, I kind of, but I am curious, and this is probably lower on the priority list. You look at guys like Ellie Tolvanen and Bobby McMahon. I don't fully know your thoughts on Ellie Tolvanen, so I'm interested to see how you speak about it here, but do you think that, and obviously, it could depend on if it's Jason who's there, or if they do, in fact, reevaluate and bring someone else in. Um, do you think that hurts their chances about regarding potentially bringing those two back? There are others that are going to be free agents like Jamie Alexiak and Jaden Schwartz, but I would hope you're moving along from that. Jacob Melanson's an RFA. I'm sure they'll sign him. I don't know. Do you think it hurts you in regards to those two specifically? Because, at least 26, I think he's played pretty all right here, but we've seen him move up and down the roster, right? I don't think his defensive production is quite where it has been before.
Yeah, I mean, I
Um,
think if Botterill stays as the GM, like it doesn't change anything. He's been in charge over the last year, like nothing really changes. So
right,
I don't think it affects that. I think Tolvanen should be gone just because if you are doing what you should do and having a development type season next year, he's just a player who's taking away a spot from, say, a Yanni Newman or younger players you want to
right,
give opportunity. So I think for that reason alone, again, I like him as a player. I think for that reason alone, he should be gone. McMahon, I think they'll try and re-sign just because look at how good the fit has been. But I don't think this affects that. He's still dealing with the same GM. Nothing really changes here. And that's
right.
part of my problem with it is that nothing really changes here.
Yeah, no, that is fair. It is interesting to see how much attention, as I'm winding you down here, as how much this attention this has got. Because I don't know about you, but I've seen a lot of folks who are in the kind of media scape or media adjacent, we'll say, right? Um, who don't necessarily they're not focused on this team, but at least in recent weeks, they've looked at it and be like, wow, look at the dumpster fire here. Look at the issues that they're having, and they'll form their own opinions and they all pretty quickly come to, hey, they should probably just change out the front office, which is something that I think a lot of us have kind of thought for several years if this is going to be a team that, does end up going it. Because, yeah, you mentioned kind of the development timeline. I mean, it feels like so stop and start. You've got a bunch of veterans who are near the end of their career, um, or on the latter end of things. And you've got a bunch of guys that are super young, like Berkeley Catton, at least right now, Oscar Fisker Molgard, Shane Wright, um, and yeah, it just feels super stop and start on some of their development. Like again, I mentioned Ryan Winterton. I mean, I feel like maybe I'm super off base with this. I think he could fill the role that Jaden Schwartz fills for you. I would rather have him get the minutes that Jaden Schwartz is getting, than not. Just I have my opinions on Jaden Schwartz. Um, it just feels unfair to a lot of them, and obviously Shane Wright's the biggest case for that, right? He's it's been pretty public about Shane, but I
Yeah.
think it goes a lot of ways with that.
Yeah. I
So
think also too, if there are no more big changes here, I think this seals the deal for sure on Shane, right? I would be shocked if he was
yeah,
back next year because again, this is the Botterill Lambert, like all of this is on Botterill and this season was the one where Shane's development really came to a halt and he was I mean, last season was a big problem too, but like this is where it got just unworkable. So I think he would, unless there's a the only way I could see the situation being salvaged with Wright in Seattle is if there was a cleaning of house and entirely new people coming in that want to
right,
see what they can have and what they can get in him.
right, because that was something with Shane in the deadline. I mean, everybody thought about him getting dangled as a piece for somebody, and there's been so much talk since Botterill came into his role about about a big swing, and I mean Shane Wright's your center point for that, right? So, well, tomorrow morning should be interesting, buddy. I appreciate you coming on. Of course, it seems like yeah, maybe one day we'll come here when it's like maybe better news to talk about instead of like a crisis, so to
Yeah,
say.
to be
You
nice.
know, because don't get me wrong, the contracts for Joey and Adam are fine. They're both great guys, but the contracts, yeah, yeah, don't know about that. Um, as we discussed several times when those things have happened. So yeah, we will see how things go tomorrow and how tomorrow goes, considering that it's a third Jersey night and you get to play Vegas. How
Okay.
fun.
You just heard from RJ and myself there. We will transition over here to about 9 minutes with Darren from Sound of Hockey. Kind of a time crunch. It is a Wednesday, the middle of the work week. None of us expected this drop to happen, so I only had a couple minutes with Darren, but wanted to get him on and get some thoughts from him on all this. So you'll hear from him now. It was a phone call, so it's just going to be the audio that you hear from that.
What's your knee-jerk reaction to this? Because I don't know, a lot of folks didn't really think that there would be much any significant change, at the higher level. This is kind of big to drop on a Wednesday. I realize it comes late into the season that there's a lot of frustration, right? And the back-to-back wasn't great. I don't know, just when you kind of find out about this, what's your knee-jerk reaction, and how do you think about all of this coming out today?
I think I'm not totally surprised. I think there was going to be some sort of measure. I really did assume that because I don't know how you can come into a season saying that you expect to start being a playoff team every year, which is what they said last year when they made the move of pushing Ron Francis into president of hockey ops role and Jason Botterill into the GM role. Right. So if that's what you're saying is we're going to start being a playoff team next year, and then you come in this year and everything completely falls apart. I think it's time to make some sort of move there. Now, when you think about the move last year, that was a half measure, right? Because you're moving roles around, but it's the same people involved. Jason Botterill was involved before. Ron Francis is obviously involved before. So now this, to me, again, it is a big thing because Ron has been so instrumental in everything from the beginning of this franchise, but it's Jason that's calling the shots this year, So now I also think, and I'm talking about both sides of my mouth here, I also think that this is still Ron Francis's team that he built.
Right.
It's not Jason Botterill's team yet. So if they give him more runway, I kind of understand that, but I also wouldn't have been surprised if they made that move too. So none of it surprises me. I think we're kind of past time to make this move with Ron Francis. I think something obviously big needs to change with this organization for them to start being a little bit more aggressive and figuring out how to be a competitive team. So that was a really, really long way of saying I'm not that surprised.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And I guess that leads to follow up. Do you consider this to be a half measure? Because I've seen some folks say, okay, Ron is fine, but they want to see more. Like, yeah, you bring up the point that this really isn't Jason Botterill's team yet. And, I know you saw it. Like, there are a lot of reports that the Kraken were looking to make a big swing. There's reporting about the potential Panarin move, and it seems like something in the summer is inevitable. Um, I'm sure we'll figure out more tomorrow, right? When we hear from Todd. But I don't know. Would you? I guess from a franchise building standpoint, if I'm asking you to be in charge here, Darren, like, are you? Do you think this is like the Ron thing is only a half measure? Would you want to see Jason out, or would you want to give him, as you mentioned, some runway, some opportunity to make this his own vision?
Yeah, I don't ever say, I want somebody to be fired by any means. It's their livelihood. And I've worked with these people before. So I don't say something like that. I say whether or not I'm surprised. I'm not totally surprised that they made a move from Ron. I Based on how things have shook out here today, I think that I would be surprised if they made a move with Jason, with Botterill. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't believe that it's really his team yet. I think
Mhm.
that he's still working with the players that Ron Francis brought in, for the most part, right? And I think that it's a little tough to pull the plug already after 1 year as him calling the shots. But also, if they did again, I wouldn't be that surprised by that either. So I think there's some big changes that are needed here, and this one is a big change. Like, don't get me wrong. I mean, Ron's been there since before day one, like literally before day one. So it is a big change, but I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. I think it's a significant measure in a way. Could they go a step further? Yeah, I think they could. Will they? I don't think so. Would I be surprised if they did do that, I think I would be a little surprised.
Someone that with kind of the frustration of everything, right? Like I know you've been one of the first to speak to Lane Lambert after the home game, and sometimes on the road in Florida. Um, Lane Lambert's gotten some flack this year. I'm kind of curious. I know it's not directly related to Ron per se, but how do you view Lane and what he's been able to do this year? Because I would make the argument that he's gotten this roster. He put this roster in a position to be in a playoff spot, right? To control their own destiny. That was all in front of you going into the Olympic break. Obviously, it hasn't panned out super great. If you're the Kraken coming out of the break, I just see a lot of blame going to Lambert. I don't think it's necessarily healthy to fire a third head coach in a third consecutive year. Um, I don't think 4 coaches in 4 years would be a great look. I am just curious to hear your thoughts on Lane, the job he's done, and if I'm sure it's too early to tell, right? But if this means anything for him, because if it's just going to be Jason in this position, like the release from the Kraken says, um, I would have to imagine that both Jason and Lane are in their respective roles next season.
Yeah, I think I wholeheartedly agree with you on that one. I have a hard time blaming Lane for really much of anything that's happened. I mean, when you think about what they said, when they hired him, he's done exactly what they wanted him to do, right? He
Right.
made the team more structurally sound, more kind of defense oriented. He's more detailed. He communicates great, and like the things that he tells you, like, "Hey, this is what's wrong." You watch it, and you're like, "Yeah, you're right. This is what's wrong." So now, the thing that does obviously concern me a little bit is that the team has. I don't think they've necessarily tuned him out, but whatever he's told them clearly has not worked here since the Olympic break. So that's the one thing that makes me wonder that. And if they were to totally clean house, if they were to move on also from Jason Botterill, I think that the next person to come in would obviously have the desire and the expectation of being able to bring their own person to coach.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the question mark, I think. As long as they're sticking with bots, I would not move on from Lane. I don't think any of this is his fault. And when you look at the past track record of the 2 previous coaches, I mean, even like with just communicating with the three individuals that have been the coach of the Kraken, Lane is the best at it, in my opinion, of the
Right.
3. So I think it would be a mistake to move on from him. Um, but that said, if they do end up doing more moves in the front office, that also wouldn't surprise me. Nothing would surprise me at this point.
Well, and that kind of leads me to the last thing I had for you. Like, I think Todd, that you talk about the three men that have been in that position that have talked to us and how they've communicated, kind of in a similar vein with the communication. Like, I'm not saying that Todd Lewicki's just going to give corporate speak tomorrow morning, but I don't, obviously he doesn't have to unveil everything that might happen over the course of the next, I don't know, couple weeks, month, right? I'm just curious, like from a vision standpoint, right? Because in my opinion, it's not worth a lot. Uh,
Sure
you
it is.
know,
Don't sell yourself short. Don't sell yourself short, Judge. You're a tremendous slouch. It's a Caddyshack.
but fans, and I'm sure you've seen it. Folks who have season tickets, right? There are season ticket holders who are upset with how things have gone since the second year.
Sure.
And I look at it at either way. You're if you're a season ticket holder, you're happy with a team that's consistently winning, going to playoffs, whatever, right? Or there's a clear vision, of building something, building towards the future, letting young players develop in front of their eyes. Kind of obviously you can't look at San Jose and think everybody's going to get a Macklin Celebrini, but you can kind of see what's going on in San Jose, right? I use them for that example.
Hmm.
Um, from a vision standpoint, because I don't imagine the Kraken would be super competitive next year. I have no idea. We have no idea, right? We have no idea what's going to happen in the next few weeks. Is there anything you would want to hear from Todd Lewicki tomorrow to just kind of think, hey, I can see what they're trying to do. I can understand the vision that they're going for and what they're trying to build. Um, does that make sense? Like, is there
It does.
anything in
I
particular?
honestly, I honestly think you hit it on the head right there. I think understanding exactly what the vision is would be great, because I still don't, it's been, sorry, I'm getting in the car here. It's been 5 years now of like, we're going to draft and develop, draft and develop, draft and develop. But I don't see any prospects in the system that are going to solve this thing next year.
Right.
To me, what needs to happen, I think what needs to happen is they need to be very aggressive with using up some of their collateral that they have, the trade chips, the extra draft picks, some of the young players, and make some big swings, and it's not just one. They got to bring in two or three, maybe four legitimate players that are kind of entering the primes of their career to really reshape this thing, change the culture a little bit. It needs to be a real shakeup to the roster. They're not one player away,
Right.
they're 3-4 players away. I think. I don't think they're anywhere particularly close. So they need to, yes, they need to make not just one big swing. I think they need to make a few relatively significant moves this offseason to try to reshape this roster a little bit. Because clearly, yeah, they've tweaked things, but like they're running it back with the same core of players
Mm-hmm.
for 5 years now, and it obviously has not worked. So time to, if you do the same thing enough times and it doesn't work, right? Whatever that saying is. So
There you go.